Hello, everyone. It's time again for the Brockton Bay Chronicles. My name's Keith. I'm here with my good buddy Andy. We're continuing Andy's journey through the world of Worm by Wildbow. Andy, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. Nice and cool here in California. Getting a little smoke from the fires way up north, but nothing too bad. It's definitely feeling like fall here. So a little sad to see summer go, but fall's always a fun time. This week we'll be reviewing Arc 18, Queen, chapters 1 to 3, and the first interlude. And as far as new business, we have one question from YouTube.
Yes, we do. We've got a good one, as usual. Question and comment from Megafire7. And Megafire says, love the comparison to Crawler, especially given that he specifically came looking for Noelle in that arc. I really dig the pick of Seamerg as the character of the arc. The Endbringers as a whole are a fascinating part of this world, and the Seamerg has always been my favorite of the three. That said, you've now seen two of them in action, but only caught a glimpse of the third. What do you expect Behemoth to be like now that you have Leviathan and the Seamerg as points of comparison? What do you think?
That was a tough question. Of all the stuff, I think, in the story so far, the Endbringers have kind of been the most unpredictable. The hardest for me to kind of think about what they will be like. I mean, Nilbog was kind of like that too,
Mm-hmm.
but we had kind of the revelation that they weren't ever human. They seem just to kind of destroy things. It's hard to say what their motivation is. I think I've speculated before that maybe they're kind of like something built into the system by whoever or whatever is providing these powers, the otherworldly creatures. And so it's almost like earthquakes, fires, and hurricanes. It's just there is no rhyme or reason almost. There is if you could capture enough data,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to understand that. So from the name, I assume it's going to be something extremely large and very like a bull in a china shop kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, and as I said, because of the unpredictability, I'm guessing there's going to be some meta aspect to it, that there's something that, like we talked about with the Cloverfield stuff, that there'll be little things that spin off of it almost in some way, either in a physical way or in a causal way, and that it leaves behind some kind of lingering negative influence on the environment. But yeah, I'm anxious to see what it's going to be like when it finally makes an appearance.
A lingering environmental influence, analogous to what the Seamerg does with the human mind.
Yeah, so you had with Leviathan, obviously it was a direct physical impact, right? There was a
Mm-hmm.
lake in the middle of town, there was all water standing everywhere, buildings destroyed, the beach was all messed up, boats
Right.
capsized. Then the Seamerg had this where people's fates were messed with, or their paths in life were almost disrupted, and you weren't sure, they were tainted, and you weren't sure who it was going to be affecting, but it was bad enough that they were quarantining in a whole area that it could be any of the people or all the people that have some kind of negative impact there. So you got physical, you've got fate, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the other one will be emotional, mental. It's the idea of maybe it's so awesome that people are kind of, their mind is blown by it, if you will, and they're just have this ongoing anxiety that like people have sometimes with, they describe claustrophobia as just like, I've got this whole mountain over me all the time.
A sense of
When
dread
yeah, sense of dread.
dialed
That's a
up
good way
to
to put it.
11.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way. Good way to describe what I'm thinking.
Excellent. Okay. Well, if and when Behemoth makes an appearance, we'll see how close you were in your prediction.
Okay.
Thank you, as always, Megafire 7. With that out of the way, we will begin Arc 18, Chapter 1, Queen. And for those of you who are playing along at home, let's take a quick assessment. A group of teenagers ranging in age of 14, I think, up to 18 have taken over the city of Brockton Bay. If you had that on your bingo card, you win.
I might just put a little asterisk next to that it's kind of the ruins of Brockton Bay.
Well, there is that.
The almost, what was the government was thinking of just calling it a whole disaster area and leveling it Brockton Bay.
Yeah, that's true. So it's not like the glimmering jewel of the East Coast.
Right. Hey, vacation in Brockton Bay. Wish you were here. Water skiing on the new lake in the middle of town.
Oh, wow. Yeah. The postcard is burned around the edge. Never mind.
Little blood spatters and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. All right. So we're picking up. The squad is standing outside Noel's vault. We're picking up where we left off from the end of Arc 16. And it's right after Tattletale is announced that maybe it's a good idea to have the PRT fire up the air raid sirens. And Skitter's asking if things are really that bad. We get this description where Tattletale shares with the team what she knew, what she learned in her efforts to try to help the travelers and help Noel. Dinah gives them a 1.7% chance that Noel will do any damage before dawn. So the squad has a little bit of time to maneuver, to decide what they're going to do. What was your thoughts on this information as we get it fed to us from Tattletale? Is she sharing with the rest of the squad what she knew, what her speculations were on what Noel was becoming or what she actually might be?
And it kind of touches on what we mentioned earlier about Leviathan. So there's these two theories. One is that she's turning into an Endbringer, and Tattletale reminds him that Leviathan at least didn't seem like it ever was human. And so unless the transformation that's going on with her is enough to totally rewrite her genetic code, it seems like it's not the same thing. So it's not like there were some other people that were normal people at one point and then had their trigger events and ended up as an Endbringer. So that's one theory, is that, she's going to be this next Endbringer, but they're really not thinking that's it. But the other one is pretty intriguing, and that is that somebody's trying to create somebody that's as bad as an Endbringer. I really think there's a third alternative. And it's kind of what we touched on last time after the Arc 17, and that was that the idea or the risk of these vials of superpowers was that if you weren't in kind of peak physical, mental, emotional state, stuff could go sideways.
Right.
And we know that Noel was, probably going to need a colostomy bag, might not even survive the surgery. They had been transported to a new world. They didn't know if they'd ever get back. They had an encounter with Seamerg, and they didn't know how much their fate might be messed up. And maybe this was part of that messing up. But she takes it anyway, and it heals her, but you don't know what happens. And so I think I speculated that this whole thing where she can't eliminate anything, or she doesn't eliminate anything,
right,
might be directly linked to the fact that when she took the serum, she wasn't able to eliminate anything. Her whole elimination track was screwed up. And so the change kind of incorporated that in a really messed up way. And so I think this could just be a not Cauldron trying to create something like this, but that it was a consequence of how messed up Noelle was when she took the Cauldron serum.
Right. Okay. I think I see where you're saying it. And then having only taken half of that on top of that,
Good point. Right.
we don't know what that serum would have done in its pure form. And you had said something about we're not even sure about the mixture rate. Yeah, she took half
Right.
of it, but was this thing completely mixed? I would like to think that it was thoroughly mixed and that she just got a raw deal as part of the Seamerg's ultimate plan for her.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of variables going on in here, and it all just goes to creating this massively unfortunate situation for Noelle.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been that, you know, Noelle might have turned out like a somewhat benevolent version of Nilbog, where
Mm-hmm.
when she touched things, she didn't eliminate anything, but anything she took in could be used as raw material to clone something that she touched,
Right.
and have these things. She could kind of create her own army.
Which would
Um,
make her, I think that would make her a master. I think, yeah, because Bitch is
yeah,
a master. She grows her dog. Skitter controls. I might be wrong on that. Maybe someone in the comic can let me know. But if she's creating clones, had she taken a serum and had she come out with similar powers, the ability to create things like this, I think she would be classified as a master, but she wouldn't be creating evil, disgusting twins.
messed up stuff. Yeah, poor copies that were evil.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But I think Telltale kind of sums it up well that she says there's just too many possibilities. It's so many things could have happened. But the result of it is where they're at now is there's this Endbringer Jr. possibly running around, very distraught on top of what she already had going. Now it looks like their one chance is gone, and it's going to be pretty bad.
Yeah. The group is in front of the vault and they're speculating about what might be going on, as you said. To the question about whether or not someone might be trying to create their own Endbringer, Tattletale goes through the possibilities of whether or not that could happen and who might be in on such an idea. And Tattletale says here, who could it be? The Protectorate might be aiming to make an Endbringer with the idea that it could fight the other Endbringers, only to have things go sour. There's the group that made people like Gregor the Snail neuter. Tattletale looked at me. You remember the paperwork we found when we infiltrated the merchant's party, Cauldron. And so there's a reference back to there where Tattletale, again, her power's working and looking at the options and the possibilities. And she talks about some of the other tinkers. She brings up Bonesaw, this Rattenfanger, Blasto, who we've heard of, Nilbog, and a couple of others. So there's a lot of possibilities that goes along with what you were saying.
Yeah, and Bonesaw even kind of talked like that. She was like, "Well, what could be done? What are the possibilities?" And so you can totally see these megalomaniac tinkers, as Tattletale calls them, going down that kind of Dr. Frankenstein route. And what could be created.
And then, yeah, you've got someone we've already seen where a quote unquote hero, such as Armsmaster, the lengths he was willing to go to for the greater good. Who's to say that there's not a tinker who, as they say, works with biology, who would, for the greater good, try to create an Endbringer with the thought that they could control it and have it fight others. So her reasoning is not unsound, if to coin a phrase. As she's looking at all the possibilities, it's a game of what if that her power is playing for her.
Right.
And as we move further on down the road into this, a little further into this chapter, Skitter desperately needs some hospital care. And so does Dinah. She's going to be going through withdrawals before too long. Dinah does try to help out. If I haven't said it in the last several arcs, Coyle is, in fact, was a disgusting human being, drugging a child and keeping her held hostage like that and abusing her for her power. So, yeah, good riddance to bad rubbish as far as the late, great Coyle goes, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Dinah's using her power as limited as possible to try to help the team map out what they're going to do. Tattletale is planning on using Coyle's old place as her new base of operation, which makes sense. She's not a fighter, so she's going to set up base there. Gru and Skitter and Dinah and Bitch end up needing to go to get some medical care. How did you like that ride in the van? That tender moment where Dinah asks if she can pet Bentley.
That was pretty cool. But before we get to that, I
Yeah.
want to bring up something, and that's that Taylor keeps noticing that Dinah has this kind of anachronistic way of saying things, or at least something that's different for her age. And so it's interesting. It's almost like, and Dinah also says she knows she's going to go into withdrawal. She can foresee it. And how horrible is that? That you,
I was going to say that's terrifying.
Yeah,
because she knows it's coming. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but you're one. It's interesting, and I think the fact that Wildbow points it out, I'm hoping isn't just a red herring, but it makes me think that maybe Dinah is older than she appears to be, or maybe her trigger event caused physical changes as well, or maybe she's just because of all the stuff she sees, it's almost like she's an old soul kind of thing, like she's lived more than she has chronologically. But they say, she says, quite welcome, and I fear this will be the case. And
you don't think that it's as Skitter has speculated, her exposure to that pervert Coyle and how he talked? You think that could be an influence? I'm not trying to ask a leading question, but
I mean, yeah, she does mention that, and she says it wasn't quite like how Coyle spoke, but there were similarities. Was it a side effect of spending way too much time around Coyle? So it is. I could see that, and the fact that she was drugged for a lot of that, never having done drugs or barely done any alcohol, I'm not sure, but from what I understand, stuff can kind of slip through when you're in an altered state of mind and you don't even realize that you're adopting things or picking things up, behaviors or habits or whatever, people scratching themselves or tapping their leg a lot or whatever. And so maybe it is from that. Maybe it is almost kind of a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, twisted way. But I don't know. There's enough different there that I'm wondering if there's something more to it than that. Anyway,
interesting speculation on perhaps something in her trigger event you think may or may not have affected her physical appearance as far as her age. Just kind of thinking that as a possibility. Interesting. Okay.
But to get back to the dog, that is a very tender scene. And I think it's great the way Taylor tries to help Rachel realize that, well, the ultimate goal is that these dogs will be socialized. So that's got to start somewhere. But just again, how heartrending it is to think that Dinah hasn't even been able to pet a dog. I mean,
right.
It just really emphasizes how messed up her life was and how deprived of everything she was that a kid should be able to experience.
Yes. And add on to that, this just popped into my mind right now. Add on to that the fact that, let's say, even 6 arcs ago, Rachel would have bit Taylor's head off for telling her how to treat her dogs.
Great point. Yeah. Rachel does seem to have kind of calmed down a little bit, or at least
I would say that
accepted Taylor into her pack kind of on a
exactly. That's where I was going.
probationary status. I don't know if you're ever fully in the pack unless you're, canine genome, but
yeah. So we get these. I won't say it's been a while, but for our group, we're in this early part of this arc, we're getting these kind of one-on-one interactions that we've come to really enjoy. That makes Worm more than just a superhero story.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely going beyond just two-dimensional pow, bam, smash. And you're seeing the interplay between people and getting more of the filling out the backstory. The one thing that I think it's pretty neat, and Wildbow kind of sets the table here, is just that, as they kind of keep asking Dinah questions but trying not to push her, Taylor figures out that Taylor herself, could end up being the cause of trouble.
Yeah.
Coming up in multiple different ways. And so Taylor has to factor that in and say, all right, well, forewarned is forearmed. How can I short circuit this and keep it from turning out that way? So
yeah, there was let's see here. When they get to the hospital, the place that Tattletale recommended for them to get care, she asked Dinah for what the chance of trouble was, and she says 15.3%. And every time there's trouble, you're in the middle of it. Would we be surprised if it by this fact that Taylor would be in the middle of trouble? I mean, who could see that coming?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Not that Taylor is a troublemaker, but she has very strong feelings about how things should go, and sometimes that can lead to trouble.
Yeah. The group gets there, and the doctor and her daughter get them set up in rooms and begins to tend to them. Bitch is having none of it and storms out. It's like you can just imagine how that goes. And then the doctor comes in to see Dinah and Taylor. Taylor, in addition to being blind, has got cracked ribs, which, I mean, I never had cracked ribs, but I've taken hits in my side that knocked the wind out of me, and it's just not a fun thing. So that could not have been enjoyable. But blind, cracked ribs, and smoke inhalation, and she's still trying to get the job done. That's right. And at this point, this is where Brian and Bitch find out that she's blind, and then Taylor's like, "Oh, you mean Tattletale didn't tell you?"
Yeah, that's kind of dropped the bomb on him. I mean, on the one hand, it's like, she shouldn't have held that back, but on the other hand, how integrated is she into the swarm sense that they didn't even notice? That's pretty impressive. The other thing is they were all going to get separate rooms, but Dinah didn't want that, and Taylor picked up on that, and so that's why they're in the room together, and that's where the blindness comes out. Was it's like, well, aren't you going to worry about privacy? Well, I can't see anyway. And so it's cool that Taylor's continuing to try to watch out for Dinah and, willing to try to help her feel as comfortable as possible, even though things are so messed up. But of course, that gives Taylor more chance to talk to Dinah, and the information gets worse and worse.
Yeah, the whole situation with the end of the world, the numbers are just horrific now. Before we do leave this subject of the blindness thing, now she's so, as you notice, she's so into her swarm sense that her vision or lack thereof isn't a hindrance while she's out in the field, but it goes to, they were in the heat of combat, or the heat of a difficult situation. She never did really come to Brian, to Gru, this person she's got this blossoming relationship with, and saying, oh, by the way, I'm kind of blind at the moment. She's not thinking in those terms. It wasn't a deliberate oversight. It was just something that she didn't share with him, didn't feel the need to share with him, because she didn't think it affected her enough to make it worth bringing up, I guess.
Yeah, it's tough. I remember being that age, and there are a number of factors. One is that you don't want to admit that something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you and I had a conversation one time where I was playing flag football and took this really bad hit where I basically flipped upside down, landed on my head,
Yeah.
and I just bounced up. And you were like, "You didn't lay there for a while and like check things out?" I'm like, "No, I didn't want anybody to know I was hurt." So yeah, there's that. I think when you're young, you just don't want to admit that there's limitations. And then also when you're with your significant other, sometimes you don't want to burden them if things are really bad, and you don't want to, say, "Oh yeah, and I know you got this going on, but I got this." And so I don't know how much of that factored in too, but she definitely kept it from them, but they didn't even know.
The leadership style. Let me see here. I don't know if we've had enough time with her in the field officially as the leader to actually make a comparison of styles between her and Gru. Do you think we've had enough data for you to make a comparison between the two?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would say Gru is more of to use, sports analogies, which is typically where we go.
Mm-hmm.
Gru is more that middle linebacker that goes around and like slaps people on the hip and says, "No, you move a foot that way, and you go
Mm-hmm.
to, and you do this, and then I'll be taking point," kind of thing. Whereas Skitter is more the one that in the huddle would say, "Hey, I've noticed that when the quarterback is going to do play action, he does this weird move with his arm first or whatever. And so y'all be aware of that." And so kind of is trying to sense the bigger picture and pick up on things and then get that information to people so everybody can be optimized on the team. So I think that's how I see the difference in the styles, I guess.
And so far, we haven't seen any recriminations or bitterness as far as Gru letting her take lead on the group. We haven't seen any recriminations that way.
No, I think that makes sense. Gru is still kind of, I think, integrating
Mm-hmm.
what happened to him. So I think part of him is happy to take a little bit of a step back. And I think he recognizes that Taylor really has this kind of almost like the I can't think of what were the radar planes that flew
What,
over the
AWACS?
battlefield. Yeah, she's got like this AWACS
Mm,
information and knowledge that is really makes her well suited for the leadership role. Usually the group with the greatest information is going to be the winning group. So
yeah.
her swarm cess provides her with all that, and I think Gru realizes how powerful that is and how good it is in a leadership role.
And 6 months, I guess 6 months ago, when we met Taylor Hebert, she was getting juice dumped on her in a bathroom stall. But my, how things have changed. So
Just a bit, yeah.
we get another moment in the doctor's office when Taylor and Dinah are alone, and I think you had kind of alluded to this, that one brief moment where Dinah calls out this percentage chance of her going home, and Taylor's shocked at the number being so low. And then through her swarm sense, she senses how Dinah kind of pulls away from her. And in that moment, she realizes that though she wasn't consciously thinking about it, she had flipped, and the possibility of her becoming the new jailer was there. And Dinah's power told her that.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be for somebody who thrives on information as a leader to have a resource like Dinah available.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like the holy grail, and it's got to be so tempting. And as much as we hate Coil, and that's not going to change,
Right.
you can understand the temptation that he gave into to harness Dinah. Not the way that he did it, but definitely that he did it. But Taylor is cut from a different cloth. She knows what it's like to be manipulated and bullied and exploited,
Mm-hmm.
and she's not going to let that happen to Dinah. And so again, forewarned is forearmed. So she gets the sense that there's a part of Dinah that is scared of being with Taylor and knowing that what could happen. And so Taylor's like, all right, well, I'm not going to let that happen, and really works to make sure she finishes what she started on this mission of getting Dinah back to her parents.
Right. Yes, as they're talking about how to manage Dinah's withdrawals, this was another heartbreaking moment where Dinah says to Taylor, suggests putting her in a medically induced coma. The doctor kind of shuns away from that because of the fact she doesn't know what drugs Coyle was keeping her on. And Dinah puts her foot down and says, no, I need to go through this. Otherwise, there's what was a 70% chance of her relapsing, because I can see the temptation, or I can see the need for it. And the more I see it, the more it kind of compounds. And then I go out and look for the drugs, and I relapse. So I have to go through this week of pain in order to, one hard week, and then I should be okay. I'm not doing the description justice, but it was just heartbreaking thinking about her power, showing her this, holding this mirror up to her about the pain and the temptation of going back on the drugs.
Yeah, I may have shared this before. If I have, I apologize. But my dad had a heart attack when he was 50. He was like a 3-pack a day smoker, and had been since he was in the Army, right out of high school. And so, back in the day, they had to give him a triple bypass. And so they had to crack his sternum and spread him and get in there. And he said the way he kept from getting back into cigarettes was he would push on that place where they cracked him open. And it was the pain of that was like a negative behavioral motivation, to say, sure, I don't want to go through that again. Now, my mom also smoked, as did most people from that age
mine
group.
too.
And she didn't have the heart attack. And so she didn't have that motivation, but she didn't want to smoke in front of my dad. So she kind of became a closet smoker, I found out later, where she would grab a cigarette here or there when she was out with friends. But it was much harder for her to give it up because she didn't have that pain to kind of, make sure that she stuck with staying off the cigarettes. And so that's how I equated that to Dinah, was that she needed to have that super painful memory. She had the numbers to back up that was what was going to keep her from backsliding.
Yeah. And now we're going to move on into chapter 2. And the scene is, we have Skitter and Dinah in a car heading toward Dinah's home. And Dinah's begun moving further into the pain of withdrawal. And she's panicking. She's like, my parents they won't want to take me back. They won't want to take me back. They don't even like the fact that I have powers. And she's going through nausea, and Skitter's trying to comfort her as best she can and saying, look, it's going to be okay. Your parents are going to love you. They aren't going to fault you for something that you didn't do willingly. It's not like Dinah, the 11 or 13-year-old girl, went out looking for the drug. She was kidnapped and abused by a guy, a supervillain.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough scene, and it totally makes sense. Kids tend to blame themselves when something that's supposed to be secure and stable gets blown up like that. A kid has a real hard time. I mean, we all have hard times trying to reconcile why did this happen to me? Why is this going on? But for a kid, it's even harder because they don't understand how easy it is for things to get off the rails, and how many people struggle with stuff that we don't even know about. They just see. Last thing she probably remembers from her life before was everybody was cool at school and she had fun with her friends, and she'd get a new outfit or whatever, or she'd get to hang out with a club. And so she's like, well, part of it must be something wrong with me, like she's saying, implying with being a parahuman. That's why all this bad stuff happened. and it's my fault in a way. And so because of that, my parents are going to think I'm what do they call it, broken material. I'm not going to be, they're not going to want me as their kid anymore. So Taylor's trying to help her work through that. And the whole time that she's also keeping her from having her hair fall into the barf bucket.
Right.
So, and the poor kid's dealing with this horrible pain. But Taylor tries to comb Dinah's hair and get her looking a little bit better and feeling better about herself. And I think she does a pretty good job given the circumstances.
Wildbow's ability to write these emotional scenes is pretty good. I don't ever get the sense that they're being emotionally manipulative, where he's trying to wring out a certain emotion out of you. Do you?
That's a good point. No, I don't think so. I think you kind of get that even when Taylor is interacting with the driver.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Wildbow was trying to be manipulative, he would have said something about, I saw a tear in the driver's eye or something, or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But instead, she says, "Do you have a brush?" And he just says, "Comb," and he hands her the comb. There's no, so it doesn't seem heavy-handed or anything like that.
Maybe that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. The emotional scenes are earned, I think, is might be where I'm
Yeah,
trying to go.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so they get to her home, and Dinah asks Taylor to go to the door first to see if her parents will want her. Just as we talk about how these emotional scenes are earned. Yeah, this poor girl. But anyway, Taylor goes and knocks on the door, has a brief discussion with her dad, with Dinah's dad, and the mom and dad come to the lawn, embrace Dinah as she comes out of the car, and thank Skitter for dropping her off. And to which Skitter turns and starts to leave and says, "Don't thank me."
Mm.
This is Skitter finally. I don't know if paying penance is the correct
Mm.
way to look at it. She's not feeling it because she feels this was partially her fault and this was her mission. It's almost like she doesn't feel she's worthy of getting thanked for doing the right thing in this instance.
I agree with that. And I think she's also feeling like she should have made something happen faster.
Yeah, she's hanging on to that.
Yeah. So I think both of those things cause her to feel, yeah, less than worthy of thanks. But then she finds these two pieces of paper,
Yes.
but since she's blind, all she can do is tuck them away for later. I'm left wondering when that later will ever come. But anyway.
Yeah, good old Wildbow. Thanks for that there, bud. She meets up with the team downtown. They've got Ballistic with them. Bitch, the rest of the Undersiders, Tattletale, Ballistic. Oh, and Parian.
Yep.
Fortunately, Ballistic's, he didn't like Skitter, understandably, but he wants to help to an extent. He gives them as much information on the Noel situation as he can, but makes it clear that he's not going to fight. And I don't know. Well, you know what? Let's see if I can pose this question to you. Do you think he's being selfish, or is he right in his desire to stay out of this because of what he fears Noel could do with him?
Well, I think if anybody would know, it'd be Ballistic.
Uh-huh.
In the previous section, it talked about how they had to take care of one of the evil clones and how difficult that was. And so Ballistic is saying, you wouldn't want evil clones that were like me.
Right.
I gotta believe them. And so I totally get that.
So Parian crafts a giant dachshund for the team to ride. Imp
Oh my
says,
gosh.
"Oh, that's lame." Gru is like, get on or walk. You don't have to ride it." And Regent kind of nudges him and says, "Dude, you've really changed." Again, another one of these moments where we're reminded that these are just teenagers.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to see that they're able to kind of chuckle a little bit. But I thought the interplay with Regent and Imp was a little interesting, where
Yeah.
Regent kind of blabs that Imp was bagging on the dogs,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like some kind of payback, Regent says. And so
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe I forgot something, but Rachel is definitely like, oh heck no. You're riding the wiener dog.
Yep. Yep.
But then she allows Taylor, and Taylor's like, cool. So that's pretty cool.
Yes. The pack bond is there, and it's very cool to see. So Tattletale already had a certain amount of information about Noelle. And as we said, Ballistic is giving the team even more information. And he also talks with them about how things came to pass with Trickster becoming the leader. Let's see here. Let me read this one section when they're discussing Noelle. Skitter asks, what are we up against? Ballistic, can you fill us in? Ballistic says, yeah, that's why I'm here. Consider Noelle a triple threat, he said. She's strong, she's got nothing to hold her back, and she's smart. And this is something that I wanted to make sure we brought up, was the fact that, yeah, as it goes a little further into this next paragraph, the fact that she's got that gamer mentality. She was the leader of their gaming group before things went south. So she's not just some random beast. She's going to have good tactical sense.
It's like an instinctual sense as well, where she's able to. I mean, Taylor's great at this kind of thing, but she gathers information and it takes some time, and then she comes up with a plan. Whereas it sounds like Noelle is able to almost sense the situation, and then those senses just kind of keep going, and she's able to adjust on the fly. And so that's even more amazing, I guess. Or if you're up against it, it's more challenging. So that's definitely something they're going to have to watch out for. That she still has that in there somewhere.
Yeah, there's enough Noelle left to where she's not like I said, she's not just a rampaging beast. There's something going on in there.
Right.
Parian says she's not going to fight either. A little disappointed in that, but again, she's never claimed to be a frontline combatant. She's all about just trying to keep her people and her territory as peaceful as possible. Ballistic leaves in a huff. He felt slighted by Tattletale pointing out that he didn't seem to be bothered by the idea of having his friend killed. Skitter, of course, is her first thought is to try to capture Noelle, and Ballistic's like, nah, dude, that's not going to work. And Tattletale's like, hey, yeah, we may have to kill her. Why don't you feel more about this? And Ballistic says, hey, this is not my friend. This is not the Noelle that I knew at the beginning of all this.
Yeah, Ballistic has been, this whole experience has really been hard on him. He mentions earlier that Krause started off as this guy who kind of was doing things for just him and Noelle, and kind of sometimes misleading the rest of the group. And then it got to the point where he was just kind of doing whatever he wanted, it seemed like. And so he's disillusioned by that. I'm sure he's disillusioned that he can't get back. He's got the whole Seamerg thing, I'm sure, weighing on the back of his mind. But then, yeah, Noelle, he doesn't even know what to think about her. And that makes sense, is that somebody who's been going through this transformation, how much that's going to twist their mind. And are they really the same person, even personality wise, anymore? So, yeah, it makes sense that he'd be pretty cold about it. I mean, they don't get it, but
Right.
But they didn't know what the travelers experienced. So I think it's easier for us to understand.
Okay, I'm trying to hold on to this thought here. Something you said at the end of the Traveler's arc, you questioned one of the attractive things about the travelers working for Coil was him having Dinah, and that maybe blurring some of the effect that the Seamerg's power may have on their fates. And then we also get, let's see here, back in the previous chapter when or earlier when Skitter and Dinah were in the hospital, and Skitter was querying Dinah about the end of the world scenario. And then Dinah was laying out the questions that Coil was asking her and what she saw. And she saw Skitter there at this end of the world scenario. And there were 5 groups, but she couldn't really lock things down because there were too many capes, and too many certain types of capes would make it too difficult for her to see things. I just wanted to bring those 2 items and have you juxtapose them. You don't have to respond or anything, but I want to I don't know if you caught that and brought those 2 items together in the back of your brain.
No, I hadn't put 2 and 2 together there, but that makes sense, So with Coil out of the picture, we've lost one of those people who can kind of twist fate or manipulate fate.
Or mitigate what the Seamerg may or may not be able to do.
Exactly, yeah. And also kind of cloud things.
Mm-hmm.
They're a variable, right? And so
Right.
now that they're gone, Dinah is able to say with a greater certainty that things are going to be really bad. Also,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you make your point before I say anything. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, without the situation that Dinah was in with Coil, she's probably not going to be used as this computer all the time and trying to recalculate things. And so that might have an impact on it as well. We saw Taylor was getting information on these numbers and changing what she was doing, making a conscious decision. All right, well, I'm not going to do that, or I am going to do this. And so if people aren't asking Dinah, or she's not sharing that information, that's not giving people a chance to choose a different fate or a different direction. And so that allows things to be less clouded. There's fewer variables there. So,
okay. Not exactly where I was trying to get you, but I am going to leave that tantalizing bit out there for future reference. So, as we're moving further into the chapter, heading down toward the end, the team comes across Miss Militia and the remaining group of wards from Brockton Bay. And Miss Militia greets them by pointing a rifle at their heads.
Yeah, she's not happy. She thinks they've done stuff, and she thinks they need to finally come and be called to account.
Yes. They're on the scene. The heroes are on the scene investigating what they thought might be an appearance of Bitch and her dogs. But it turns out that Noelle was there, and she has kidnapped Vista. And that just doesn't sound like it's going to be any kind of a good combination, does it?
Not at all. No, that could be really bad.
And so now we move on to what has to be probably, I think it's safe to say, one of my top 3 favorite interludes in this entire massive work by Wildbow. And we start off bonus interlude number 1 in this arc, meeting Kevin Norton. And Kevin Norton is the most powerful man in the world. And we find Kevin and his faithful sidekick, this dog, this kind of working mutt, as he called him, named Duke. And they're making their way down a rainy street in London. As you got into this interlude, any early thoughts on this, or was it just kind of another case of, oh my, where's Wildbow taking me in this one?
Yeah, he threw me for a loop again on this one. I kept trying to find little clues, or I'd kind of, well, what does that mean, but nothing really jumped out at me, and I couldn't connect it to anything.
Yeah, and I think that this story, this interlude could and I think Tony said this could be its own standalone short story.
Mm.
You wouldn't have, you could drop this piece of literature anywhere and find it entertaining. Kevin is homeless, and he's kind of a down on his luck drifter, and he's panhandling, asking folks for a few pence to help the most powerful man in the world. He says that several times, and he talks to his dog Duke about the situation that he found himself in, and how the people who used to work in, or pardon me, used to have a bakery in this area, and how they used to leave food for him and stuff like that. Sounded like they were decent human beings who were trying to help him out as best they could. And Kevin comes across a young lady named Lizette. She does this act of kindness and gives him £10 note and entertains his request to walk with him for a while.
I was kind of surprised at that. He didn't seem like the kind of person that someone would want to hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
And she had generously given him some money, and 9 times out of 10, maybe even 99 times out of 100, that's what people will do, and then it's like, all right, I'm moving on now.
Right.
But they stayed together. So I started wondering if she had some kind of ulterior motive or if she knew something. But as the story went on, I thought, no, she's just entertaining him for some reason. So
yeah, she was just a kind person, and she was just humoring him. As we said, Kevin is on his way home, and he asked Lizette to walk with him to this place to give him the boost, the moral support that he needs to do something, to do this on this one day. And as they're walking, she's kind enough to listen to his story. She talks about his rough life and how he got involved with someone, and that didn't work out, and he ended up homeless, and commented on the fact that there's abuse shelters for women, but none for men. Throughout this all, did you have a growing sense of what Kevin was like before we even get to the big bombshell? As Wildbow's laying this out here, did you find it at least less jarring than other interludes, and did it keep your interest the whole way through?
it kept my interest. It felt very apart from anything. I was really, I mean, you've got parahumans everywhere scattered around the world, and villains, and the assorted endbringer. So there's always a chance there'll be something that links it in. But it just wasn't clicking for me. But what it reminded me of was an old Robin Williams movie called The Fisher King.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. But Robin Williams plays a homeless guy who hallucinates the Red Knight, and he's this super ornate medieval knight on a giant charger with a lance, and then like flames and smoke behind him. So I almost had this sense of something like that, and in the movie it represents something, and you slowly find out what it is. But I just wondered if it was something relating to that, or something analogous to that, I should say. But it was entertaining. Yeah, I was engaged. It's very interesting vignette, little story about what's going on here. I just couldn't see anywhere where it was going.
Right. And so Kevin and Lizette come to this area down by a small stream, and it was a place where Kevin, when he first started out as a homeless individual, he would come there to seek shelter. And he was, as he said, he's going home. This was home for him. After a few moments, kneeling by the water, Lizette's holding Duke. Kevin sees the one individual who he was in his heart hoping he wouldn't run into, and it's Scion. They're hovering silently over the ground, staring at Kevin. And then we get this whole introduction into their relationship. Obviously, Lizette is freaked, just shocked at the presence of this golden man. And Kevin talks to Lizette and tells her about how the two of them became partners. I wouldn't say friends, but they began interacting with each other. Quite the shift in the story.
Yeah, the very unexpected. It was I don't know. Like I said, I just didn't know what to expect, but it certainly wasn't this.
Mm-hmm.
The way Cyan has been described before is just showing up and, zooming around and fixing things, but not something that you can really count on or predict. And yet this man is just returned to a place, and all of a sudden, and he knew Cyan might show up, and he did.
And there's a reason why Kevin didn't want him, had hoped that he wouldn't be there. But that's a little bit further down into the chapter, to the interlude. He does explain to Lizette what happened. It was early on when Kevin was newly homeless, and he came across Cyan, if you will. He showed up one night when he was sleeping out there, and Kevin laid into him and was cursing him and beating him, and was venting anger at Cyan that he was really possibly should have been turning inward at himself, cursing himself for being some kind of a loser, which you don't get that impression about this. This guy just had a bad streak of luck, I guess you could say.
Definitely hard to imagine that kind of scenario going on with somebody, but I know it happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was Lisette mentions that Cyan looks sad,
Mm-hmm.
and Kevin says no, he is sad, or he exudes this sadness,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what kind of enraged Kevin, was that, look at my life. I'm the one who can be miserable. You fly around. You're impervious. What right do you have to look sad or to be sad? But the fact that Kevin was so messed up that he would go beat on Cyan, like, whoa. I mean, this guy was rock bottom for sure.
Yes. Yes. It's gonna go pound on this invincible being and curse him and stuff. And but anyway, um, and he tells Lizette what happened, about how occasionally Cyan would come to Kevin, and it turns out, I guess, Kevin is the one who gave him his clothing, and Kevin was the one who talked him into going out and helping people do something. Kevin said, "Go work in a soup kitchen." He was really kind of aiming that statement at himself. He told Lizette, but he did tell Cyan to go and help people, fight the inbringers, save people from accidents, or things like that. So here you have this guy, this lowly homeless guy, commanding the most powerful person in the world. Interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, and I really like how Lisette starts trying to unravel it.
Mm-hmm.
That when Kevin met Cyan, it was like he didn't have direction. And Lisette says, well, it's almost like he's autistic, like he's got too much input, and he doesn't know how to process it. And he needed somebody to tell him what to do. And that would be kind of an amazing way to counterbalance the OP power of, I guess that's redundant, the OP nature of Scion. So give somebody, make him impervious and able to fly and lasers and the whole thing, basically Superman, but make them able to feel all the pain and all the negatives in the world at the same time,
Interesting.
to the point where they're overwhelmed and don't know where to start. It's, we've all experienced that on a micro scale, when somebody says, hey, can you help me move out of a storage area or something, and then you show up and it's just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know, how did you even get the door open, or pick any, somebody's got, hey, can you help me with my backyard landscaping, and you get back there and it's like, oh man, did you bring a flamethrower or some napalm, because this is, the weed whacker is going to die after about 3 feet. So that would be a way to kind of counterbalance the power, would be to make them paralyzed by, overwhelmed by not knowing where to start. But yeah, Kevin all of a sudden is the one that gets through and says, well, at least do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that he's like, well, okay, I've got a prime directive now. And so off Scion goes.
And we find out that Scion was never his name.
Mm.
Kevin tells Lizette about one particular night where he was rambling to Scion. He doesn't even really remember the general course of the conversation, but Scion fixes on one word that Kevin says, and it's not till later that he realizes what he set in motion. And the word was Zion. Later, I believe it was some news person or someone asked him his name, and they think he says Scion, but for whatever reason, he repeats the word Zion, and his name became Scion.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you can imagine that. I can imagine that if I had infinite power, but also had infinite knowledge of all the suffering going on,
Mm-hmm.
that I would want to try to somehow turn things into a paradise. Zion, in the Matrix movies is where when the war's over, that's where the party will be, right?
Right. Yeah.
That was the promised land, so to speak. And so that would be maybe in the forefront of his mind was just I'm trying to make that happen, trying to clean everything up.
Time is running out for Kevin. And that's part of the reason he was happy that Lizette decided to come along with him. And he passes this burden, this responsibility onto Lizette. Turns out Kevin is dying of hepatitis. And the thing that he feared was, and this was such good writing by Wildbow, Kevin had told Scion to fight the Endbringers, to stop them, which is what he did. But what he really had hoped that Scion would do would be to kill them. And Kevin's big fear was that he had not been specific enough in that instance. We don't know if that's the case, because after Kevin passes this responsibility of being partners with him to Lizette, Scion takes off. This was quite a revelation.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get where Kevin's coming from, and he could very well be right, that he wasn't specific enough. It could also be that Scion knows that if he took them out, it would make matters worse, or he thinks it might make matters worse. So it's hard to know what's going on in that totally silent and sad looking head. But yeah, now Kevin says, Lisette, you gave me money and you were brave enough to follow me here. So you seem like the universe has selected you to be the next liaison with Scion, or the Golden Man.
Yeah. And of course, she is freaked out by this responsibility. Why are you giving this burden, if you will, to me? Let's see here. So we have in the big chessboard that is Worm, we've got Scion, we've got the Endbringers, we've got these otherworldly beings, entities, as you've been calling them, all somehow possibly interrelated. I'm not going anywhere specific with this statement, just kind of looking at the chessboard, as it were. Those are kind of the big players on the scene.
Okay, I can go with that.
So yeah, Kevin was there to get his affairs in order. He hands off this partnership to Lizette. He says to her, hey, cool deal, right? Becoming the most powerful person on the world just for giving a guy a 10-pound note. Yeah.
Huh.
Nice day, huh?
Well, it definitely comes with some caveats, right? She could try to tell somebody, but Kevin says they'll look at you like they looked at me, like you're off your rocker. So don't know if you're going to get anywhere with that. But
and he had tried to get Kevin had tried to get Scion to interact with the good guys, as he put it, from time to time, but For whatever reason, he wouldn't. But
Mm.
as Kevin puts it, Lizette seems like good people. So, hey, Golden Man, if you need to talk to somebody, if you need direction, seek out this young lady. She's good people.
Yeah, that's the whole thing is pretty surreal,
Right.
that this homeless guy can be kind of the liaison, and then somehow it's in his purview to be able to hand off that mantle, or
Yeah, and we don't
that.
know if that's going to be effective, but it is interesting that it could be.
Right. Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of the interlude with Kevin and Duke walking off in the rain, and Lizette left dumbfounded and wondering what the future may hold for her.
And if she can have her 10 pounds back.
Right. She's probably not sure she's got the good end of that deal. And that moves us into chapter 3, which will be the final chapter that we're going to cover in this episode. Miss Militia, we're back with the team with Miss Militia and the wards, and she's not buying anything that the Undersiders are selling. The Undersiders are saying, hey, we're partially responsible for this. We're willing to share some information with you guys. We've got possibly a new Endbringer, or certainly a very dangerous individual that we're going to have to contend with. Miss Militia's, how she put it, yeah, I'm beginning to see why Armsmaster was so frustrated with you Undersiders. Every time we run into you, we're left in the dark. Vast amounts of information missing from the overall picture. There's always surprises, so I'm paying very close attention to what you're saying. Case in point, you say that Vista was taken, not murdered. Miss Militia is no fool. I don't think I've mentioned it recently how much I like Miss Militia as a character. I mean, she's not invincible or anything like that, but she comes across as a good leader. And the team seem to respect her. She's no nonsense. She's about business, and I really appreciate that about her as a character. Tattletale and team, they spill what they know about the situation, and the heroes aren't necessarily ready to accept it at face value.
And I understand that. I mean, anytime you're working with villains, you got to expect that there's some kind of ulterior motive.
Oh, yeah.
I think if they had framed it like, all right, this is almost going to be like an Endbringer event, if they'd started off with that as their bottom line up front, their headline, new Endbringer in the block, then maybe that would have got their attention, and they would have been able to say, nobody's trying to put one over on anybody here. This is an Endbringer level event that could be coming, and we need your help. Then maybe we wouldn't have had all this. That would have allayed some fears, maybe. I don't necessarily agree with Miss Militia kind of invoking Armsmaster. I mean, that guy was kind of a paranoid megalomaniac. So he wanted to know everything about everybody, and that's pretty unrealistic. So there's always going to be some stuff in the dark here. I get that the wards and Miss Militia are worried because Vista's gone. They don't. There's all this damage. They don't know what's going on. But I think what they tell her is legit. Why would we kill her and then come back?
Right.
If we saw you, we'd run the other way as fast as we could. So it seems like there's just an awful lot of paranoia, I guess, on the side of Miss Militia and the wards. I guess everybody's on edge, right? The whole city's still a war zone. So
yeah,
that's understandable. But it seems like this could have been resolved faster. But maybe people just aren't getting to the point because of how anxious they are about everything else going on.
Could be. Tattletale spoons out some information in an effort to try to smooth down the ruffled feathers. She comes clean and says, look, we were working for Coil. So were the Travelers. The Travelers had 2 team members who didn't see any action, and this Noel was one. The team shares with the good guys what they think may be going on with Noelle. Nobody really knows for sure, but they share what they knew. Oh yes, and we also Tattletale talks about the situation that happened at the mayoral debate, where yeah, those bodies weren't human bodies. This it was all a setup from Coyle. She does misdirect the good guys, pointing out that Coyle's death, leaving that up in the air, not directly saying that Coyle was dead and Skitter killed him, but that Coyle's death happened at the debate. We're walking a fine line with the truth in some areas, and we're willingly sharing information in the others.
Yeah, I think Tattletale's probably using her power and realizing that it would be easy to get them off track if she divulged too much.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of saying, all right, yeah, walking the fine line between what do I need to say to get them on board and what is too much or too little. And so I think she's going through that. And then they finally get around to Gru saying, you need to get everybody out here.
Right.
We got a situation.
Yeah, because Tattletale says this is a Class S threat or really close to it. Miss Militia responds, there are 6 Class S threats active in the world at large. The Endbringers make up 3 of them. The Slaughterhouse 9 as a group make up a 4th.
Yeah.
And you're saying this Noelle is on par with one of them. Yeah, man. So the Undersiders are like, look, this is the real deal. Y'all need, as you said, Gru pointed out, y'all need to get everybody. And that was, I believe was it either Triumph or Battery saying, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, we play your game, and somehow you guys end up in a better situation because either some of your key enemies are either dead or injured, and you're more powerful. And that's where Gru says, nah, dog, we're not even trying to do that because we want everybody, all the strongest heroes that you can get over here. Miss Militia gets Assault to confirm some part of the story by confirming that Dinah Alcott is back at home with her parents. So that gave some credibility to what they were saying.
Exactly. Yeah. So at least they're not lying about that, because if they were true villains, they wouldn't have given up Dinah.
Right.
Dinah is like the holy grail of information. And so, but Assault calls, and sure enough, they gave her up. So yeah, that does give them that air of credibility.
It opens the door for a conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so Miss Militia says, okay, look, that helps that you were truthful about that. So we're going to move forward with tentative cooperation, and we're going to help you. But in exchange for that, you're going to give us a hostage for the duration of this. And we'll take Hellhound if you don't mind. And Rachel's like, nah. she answers in a very Rachel way. Says, no, I'm not doing that. To which Gru and Skitter emphasize that really wouldn't be a good idea. And here's why. But Skitter says, you know what? I'll drive my bugs away. I'll give up my weaponry, and I'll be your hostage.
Yeah. And they reluctantly agree to that. But then it's a real struggle for her to, let them start checking through her stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I thought was really interesting was that Triumph found the 2 pieces of paper and read them, but then just put them back. Didn't say anything. Didn't give us any clue. Didn't have any reaction. Dang it.
Nah, that was just Wildbow messing with you, dog.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Every week it's the same thing. Mess with Andy.
So no hints as to what, if anything, is written on them. Well, obviously, as you said, he read them. So he put them back where they found them. She hops in the PRT van with Miss Militia and company, and the rest of the group rides on the dogs and the I'm presuming the cloth dachshund. They're heading to PRT HQ. This van ride over, it wasn't exactly a warm and fuzzy get to know you session, was it?
Oh my gosh, no. This is like, I imagine people in the van on the way to Gitmo or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She's getting grilled pretty mercilessly, and it's Miss Militia that has to keep stepping in and saying, tone it down there. I don't want to have to put you on report. And Clock Blocker just won't let it lie down.
I see where he's coming from. And he's like, hey, I don't care. Give me the lane patrols, put something on my record. I need to get this stuff off my chest. And he goes to bat for Amy for curing his dad from his leukemia, I think it was. And he goes to bat for Victoria and talking about how, you know what, nobody got to see her. Only a few select members of her family. We knew she was in bad shape before they sent her to the Parahuman asylum. But nobody got to say goodbye. Nobody on the squad got to say goodbye to her. And he lays into her. It's some pretty good Perry Mason lawyering that he's laying into Skitter with.
I agree. But I think he's, what stuck out to me, and obviously he doesn't know all the backstories when they get talking about Shadowstalk. And, I think it is a credit to Taylor that she doesn't delve into any of the stuff that was outside of the wards.
Right.
She doesn't talk about any of that.
It would have been easy to slip.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it would have bolstered her case, so to speak. That, hey, yeah, it's a bit understandable when people who are putting their lives on the line overreact sometimes or use too much force. But when they're also like that in civilian life, that's a big problem. But she doesn't say any of that. So it's kind of like Clock Blocker wins the courtroom case, if you will, in the van, but it's only because Taylor withholds evidence.
Yeah, because to give away too much would have required her revealing more about herself than would have been advisable. And kudos to Taylor for doing that, for keeping those cards close to her chest. Skitter comes off initially a little high and mighty in this thing with Shadow Stalker, but she didn't know about the length that Regent put her. Did she? She didn't know that Regent had her almost kill herself.
No, she didn't know that.
Okay. So she managed to not let that disturb the point she was making, but still, they kidnapped her. They turned her into a meat puppet. And whether or not she deserved it, that can be debated. But as far as Clock Blocker was concerned, he kept coming back to the point that she was a member of his team and she was a hero and you're a bad guy and you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that he's basically saying, I don't care how horrible a person she was. She's on our team. So it's your bad. And it's like, no. I mean, it's the same thing we run into often in society, where it's just like, we acknowledge that this person that's in our group is a horrible person, but because they're in our group, we're going to protect them. And it's like, yeah, there should be loyalty in a group. That's cool. Most people would agree with that. But there also have to be maintenance of standards.
Yeah.
And if you throw those out, then what kind of group are you? And so they had kind of had Shadow Stalker on probation and stuff at various times in the ward, but I'm really surprised that, well, not that surprised, but in a perfect world, she would have been put in juvie.
Right.
She would have been booted out of the wards, but they let her stay because they needed her, and she was good at what she did, even though she was a horrible person.
Yeah, that's that gray area that Wildbow uses throughout this story. Often, yeah, it's easy to look at faction and be, yeah, our guys are this and your guys are that, and there's no room for compromise. Skitter kind of holds up that mirror. Let's see if I'm making a good comparison. Yeah, Clock Blocker, you guys had to know she was problems. She had problems. As far as us villains go, we don't pretend that our lunatics are good people. And I kind of, maybe unfairly, think of a bitch in that comparison, where Shadowstalker is playing at being a good person, where Bitch is just who she is. And this is how you have to deal with her. We don't claim she's a good person.
Exactly. Yeah. They know, they still have their code. They
Right.
still have things that they won't do or lines they won't cross, but they don't hold themselves up in front of society and try to pretend that they're all knights in shining armor, which the Protectorate and the wards kind of do. That's the goal, I think, of folks like the Protectorate and the wards. But if you're going to talk the talk, you should walk the walk. If somebody's not adhering and rising up to the standard, then they should be dealt with.
Yeah, I agree. And as we're heading toward the end of this chapter, the van arrives at PRT headquarters, and Skitter notes how she is now entering this place. Yeah, the team was already waiting for her at the lobby, and we close out with Skitter thinking, I entered once as a prisoner and a thief, once as an invader and kidnapper. It was an eerie thing to be entering as an ally to the good guys when I'd never felt further from being one. And that brings us toward to the end of what we're going to cover this in this episode. Final thoughts there, bud?
Well, it was an interesting ride this time. No pun intended there with Taylor and Skitter getting out of the van, but even got to ride on a wiener dog for a while. But yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see how this goes. It's
the forces are gathering.
Right. And we've had these patterns of, some horrible antagonist showing up, whether it be Leviathan or the Slaughterhouse Nine. But now we have kind of an unknown. We know it's bad, but we don't know how bad. How much of Noelle is really still in there? Is there any chance of that she's going to pull a punch, or that she's going to dial it back a little bit, or kind of wake out of her rage, or has she gone around the bend? Nobody knows really. I mean, Dinah might know, but they've let that card go back on the shelf, and they're letting her try to get back to her life. Kudos to them for doing that, when be a valuable tool to have. But yeah, this is more. There's more unknown around this upcoming battle than the previous one, so that makes it even more interesting, I think.
All right, buddy. Cool. And folks, let's see here. We are at the end of part 1, and in part 2, we will review chapters 4 and 5 and the second interlude. And we hope you'll be joining us for that, as always. And with that, we'll be signing off for now. Thanks for spending time with us, as always, everyone. I personally am really hyped for us to conclude this arc and arc 19. I'm really looking forward to this. So we hope you'll be here for the fun. And until next time, take care.
Thanks for joining us. I hope that I don't fixate too much on the 2 notes that Taylor has tucked away that I may or may never find out what they say. But I'm really hoping that next time I get to find out. So maybe you'll stick with us and find out at the same time. Thanks. Thanks for joining us in this podcast. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we'll hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more in the link down below. Catch you later.